Bismillah wassalatu wassalam ala Rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum, audience. Welcome to the second recorded episode of season 3 of the Scholar and the Student podcast. I'm your host, Moss, and today is a very interesting episode. We finally got a female on our podcast, Alhamdulillah. So, ladies and gentlemen, brothers, sisters, please join me in welcoming, join me in welcoming to Botswana virtually for the first time, I'm assuming, a British Muslimah, British-Pakistani Muslimah who is a post-grad student in London, currently doing her postgrad in design and engineering. But before that, she studied modern languages. She's got something to do with a little island called Japan as well. We'll get all into that. But before I botch up the intro any further, please welcome to the show Sanaa Fatima Ahsan. Assalamu alaikum, Sana. Welcome and congratulations on your first accolade, which is being our first female guest.
Walaikum assalam. Thank you. That's so funny. Yeah, hi. As mentioned, I'm Sana, British-Pakistani postgrad student. I majored in German and Arabic, and I've been more than a little obsessed with Japan since I was very, very young. So, yeah, nice to meet everyone virtually.
Likewise. So, okay. I'm not sure where we can start this. How does a British Pakistani Muslimah end up being obsessed with something like Japan? Because, besides like Pakistan also being in Asia, Southeast Asia, if you will, there's like no real connection there. So I also have a bit of a thing for Japanese culture, but why don't you start and tell us how you got obsessed with the language known as Nihongo?
Yeah. So basically, I mean, there's no real clear start. I've just had a general. It's just drawn my interest since I was like 3, 4 years old, and it continued. And as I got older, it morphed into the interest in sort of like anime and Japanese music, and that's what got me into learning the language because I wanted to understand with my own brain like what they're saying and not always have to use subtitles. So I think it's a pretty standard route actually for a lot of young people in the UK and in Pakistan. Like, anime is popular everywhere. So
Oh yeah, no, definitely. In my case, when I was growing up, so in Botswana, we used to watch a lot of South African TV. So one of the most
Mhm,
popular channels, maybe it still kind of is, SABC, South African Broadcasting Channel. So
mhm.
every day, without fail, we used to go home like after school, so like 1, 2 o'clock, whatever, and it used to be such a tight fit. It's like I know I've got to go to madrasa at like 3, so at
Mm.
2:30 I got to watch Pokemon. I go to madrasa at 3, I come back at 4, and then it's Dragon Ball Z time. And then I think on weekends or Fridays it wasn't Dragon Ball Z, it was Beyblade or something. So that was
Mhm.
our first introduction to anime, although it was dubbed. Like it was as
Yeah.
Canadian or as American as it can get.
Yeah.
But when Dragon Ball Super came back in 2015, it started only in Japanese, and the only way you could watch it was with Japanese and with subtitles. And even
Mhm.
before that, anime was kind of taking over. Naruto had taken over the reins from Dragon Ball, One Piece, these
Yeah.
big names, and then of course, your Death Notes and your all these big things that popped off. So that's kind of, I won't say my introduction, but yeah, that's basically where I started with Japan and Japanese culture. My sister, by the way, was majorly into anime. I remember
Mm.
the date as well. It was like 24th of December 2010. We were watching Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood together, and it just came out. Like it was the
Oh
new
yeah,
thing
yeah,
on the
yeah.
block. Yeah, I mean, now it's like a classic, but back then it's like, oh, what is this? What is this? And I remember she was eating breakfast and she lost her appetite because there was just blood everywhere. So yeah, that's how anime that's how anime gets sometimes. But she was majorly into speaking Japanese. Now I think it's more Korean for her. But myself, I'm just starting into that a whole, Japanese thing and music as well. Have you heard of, since we're talking about music, have you heard of Yorushika?
Yorushika. I feel like I've heard, but I've not listened. If that makes sense. I've seen the
Right.
name. Yeah.
Yeah. So have you heard of Hatsune Miku then?
Oh, definitely. Hatsune Miku. I was a big Vocaloid
Yeah.
fan. Huge Vocaloid
Yeah,
fan.
yeah, yeah. So Yeah, so Nabuna, who's like the producer of Hatsune Miku's music or whatever, the
Ah,
guy behind the project, so to speak, he has
yeah.
become the guitarist. Or basically, he started a new project called Yorushika. It's with this other vocalist. Her name is Sui, and
Hmm.
they've got some upbeat like songs and all that. Like it's definitely a departure from Hatsune Miku, which was Vocaloid, kawaii sort of thing. Here, it's more like power
Yeah.
ballads and rock ballads, if you
Oh,
will.
nice.
But it's yeah, so it sounds really cheerful. Then you read the lyrics and you're like, oh my god. I mean, he talks about suicide and death and murder. I'm like,
Mm.
what the hell's wrong with this guy? But I'm really enjoying that for whatever reason at the moment, and it's probably my favorite Japanese musical act to come out at the moment. So speaking of from your past experiences and your past appearances on other podcasts, particularly Korekara, you mentioned that you had been self-taught in Japanese, or basically you undertook that path of learning Japanese on your own from the age of 13
Yeah.
to 16. Would you like to expand upon that more? And, you know, how did you end up doing that? Because I'm sure when you were that age, the internet was a very different place to what it is today.
Yeah, I mean, when I was 13 already, so my main reason to learn is because I really like Japanese rock. I still do, and yeah, a lot of songs weren't translated, so I just had to figure it out by myself. And so I actually initially decided when I was 10, but I think 10 is too young to try something so difficult, and I gave up really quickly. But yeah, when I was 13, I remember my 13th birthday consciously thinking like, okay, today's the day, I'm gonna learn Japanese. And it really started. So first, I didn't have a phone, so I got like my dad's phone and got a basic Japanese beginners app and just learned hiragana, and I learned the pronunciation and katakana and like basic sentences and also numbers. I did all of that first. And once I got that down, it was a lot easier to access. Like Japanese, unlike some of the other languages, Japanese is such like a popular language, so there's just an abundance of resources for no matter how you learn. So I think it was relatively simple to find something online that I could follow or use. And that's when I heard about the Japanese language proficiency test. So from 13 till 17, I used that as kind of my basis for what I'm aiming for. And in the process of doing that, I just naturally like got better. And I still have a lot of Japanese friends that I met online, and I still regularly talk to. So that helped. Playing video games with Japanese gamers online, like, yeah.
Oh wow, amazing, amazing! And if I may ask, what level of JLPT are you currently certified at, or did you not bother with that at all? It was just a benchmark sort of thing.
Oh no, I did it because I think it's quite weird for a 13-year-old to think this, but I remember thinking if I'm gonna learn language, I might as well get some like qualification out of it so it could help me in my career. I was quite forward thinking. So yeah, I'm certified up to N3, and so I just have one level. I've got two levels to go, but realistically, I'm only probably going to attempt N2 because that's the minimum you need to work in most companies in Japan.
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard the same from other acquaintances of mine in Japan itself. And N1 is basically all military speak. Like I don't know anyone, like even native Japanese people don't speak like that. But
Yeah,
yeah.
I didn't
And how
see the
far
point.
yeah. Now, I was just gonna ask. Yeah, I was gonna ask. I've heard as well from my acquaintances in Japan who are foreigners as well that it's kind of useless to even like think about unless you're genuinely at that level. N5 at N4, most people just go straight to N3 or N2 because apparently, if you've been watching anime like in Japanese, even with subtitles for a couple of years, you're probably like N3 level already. So you might as well just
Mm.
attempt N3 or N2. What's your take on that as someone who has gone through that stage?
I I wouldn't recommend just relying on the fact that you've watched anime. Like your understanding will be very good, but the JLPT tests very like specific elements of language learning, and they test it in isolation. So it's not really how can you comprehend a sentence. You'll be really good at the listening sections. I remember N5, N4 is like slower than how anime people in anime speak. So you'd be great at that, but there is a kanji recognition section. There is a grammar section. In particular, the grammar section can be quite hard, especially when you get to, or at least N4, I remember it was a little bit harder because there was a bit of nuance. N3 was a lot harder. Um, so, you know, no matter how much, even if you're someone who just kind of learnt to speak the language and can speak comfortably, if you haven't studied grammar formally or kanji formally, then I think it would be a bit difficult. Not saying it's impossible. I think N5 would be easy, to be honest. If you just know like 100, 150 kanji, you can do N5. But N4, I remember I think I ended up learning like 700 or 800. Maybe that was too much. And then N3, I had over 1,000. I say I learned them, I don't remember them anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the nature of the game with kanji, because I think even Japanese people, like indigenous Japanese people, have to continuously revise them every so often or whatever the case is. And you didn't just stop at learning the language to watch anime or listen to Japanese music, but of course, you're free to expound on that. You actually ended up going to Japan. So, would you like to talk more about your trip to Tokyo? It was more than a trip, to be frank.
Oh yeah, I just got the opportunity to do an internship with a video game company, or not a video game company, like augmented reality company, but they were working on video games when I was there. For 2 months back in 2019, which is a great experience because I had never imagined that I could get to Japan so soon. I thought it'd be something I'd have to save up for, work for, but the fact that I could go and work there and stay there for so long was really great. And actually, as part of my course now in June, I'll be moving back to Japan. For about 4 months, I will be living in Kyoto, inshallah. I mean, I was meant to go in April, but the visa issues and the border has just opened meant there's a bit of difficulty. So, inshallah, June, because if I don't go in June, I don't know when I will be able to go. But yeah, it was a great experience, and it really fit with kind of my dream timeline. Like I don't like to think too much about, oh, I need to do this by this time, because I think, you know, everything whatever's meant to happen to me will happen whenever it happens. That's such a bad sentence. But I remember thinking when I was 14, 15 and talking with my friends, like, gosh, I really want to be able to go to Japan like when I'm 20 or 21. And I managed to go when I was 20, so that was nice.
Wow. Wow. Absolutely amazing. And yeah, alhamdulillah, things are opening up. So we actually will get to travel. I meant to go to Japan as well. When the Olympics were slated for 2020, and they still went on with the Olympics 2020 thing, but it happened in 2021. Obviously, travel was severely restricted back then. So Japan's definitely on my bucket list. How did you find living in Japan and working in Japan? Because you were more than a tourist there. You were there for an extended period of time. And even now, since you are looking to go back there, you'll be more than a tourist. So, what's it like as a British-Pakistani Muslimah going to Japan and, having to find halal food and maybe finding a place to pray, sorry, and, all these things that you have your faith as well, but you don't want to, compromise everything for the sake of, I don't know, going to the mosque 5 times a day. And there's a balance to be struck. You've got to go to work as well. And sometimes the hours can get crazy, or at least that's the Japanese stereotype. You didn't exactly face that when you went there last, but what's life like in Japan for a Muslim?
Honestly, I think Japan is really difficult to live. It's a difficult place to be consistent and really stay on my deen. First thing, the obvious thing is like finding halal food. Just food was very difficult because even though there's a stereotype that Japanese people eat a lot of fish and there's a lot of healthy and vegetarian dishes, it's not necessarily the case. Most places have meat. Even places that have fish dishes will have like a meat broth, and no one understands what halal is, and no one can understand why I would have to ask so many questions before I eat. I mean, my coworkers understood, but when I went to restaurants, and this is someone who, as I can speak Japanese, and I would ask them, "Does this have meat in it?" They'd be like, "No," and then I'd be like, "Okay, does the broth have meat in it?" They'd be like, "Oh yeah." Or I'll ask, "Is it cooked with the meat? Is it in the same pot? Does it use the same oil?" Yes, yes, yes. So even I remember I was eating MOS Burger. Oh, there's a place called MOS Burger, by the way. It's you should go.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
probably not, because there's nothing
yeah.
halal there, because even though they have like a soy burger, it's cooked on the same like thing as all the meat burgers. So stuff like that, no one really understands why. There are halal restaurants here and there, especially in the tourist areas, because Japan gets a lot of tourists from Southeast Asia. So if you went to Asakusa, like the big temple, or you can find. I found a prayer room. I went to have halal wagyu because I really wanted to try wagyu. Um, but other than that, it was very difficult. And then mosque-wise, there's not that many mosques either. So my nearest mosque, it was not too far away, but because it was awkward in terms of it was not on my line, and there were a couple of transfers I had to make, even though it wasn't far, it wasn't easy to get there. So I went a couple of times. I was in Japan for Eid in 2019, so I went there for Eid prayers. But other than that, I didn't get much opportunity to go to the mosque, and my office was so tiny, so it's hard to find somewhere to pray. Basically, it was a lot of like, just let's just use Uniqlo changing rooms. Um, yeah, looking back now, I think because of all of that, I just ended up not praying as much as I would do at home. And so I remember, like, on my way back, on the flight back, I remember like thinking, reflecting, and just being like, if I go back, I need to find a way, because it wasn't easy. But I had really great coworkers, so they often showed me to like find halal places for me. And they were very like easygoing. Because it also, the fact that I can't eat a lot of food restricted my how much I could socialize with other people. And it was often quite sad when like my coworkers would be going to lunch. They'd be like, "Sana, do you want to come?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, where are you going?" And they'd be like, "This restaurant." I have to look up the menu, and there would be nothing I could eat on there, absolutely nothing. And then I would have to be like, they would feel bad because they want to go there, but they feel bad about leaving me out, and I would feel bad because I don't want them to feel like that. It was just, yeah, stuff like that was difficult. And so I'm going to Kyoto this time, not Tokyo. Kyoto is a bit smaller, a bit more traditional Japanese. I'm hopeful because it's very well known for its vegetables and its tofu. So I'm hoping vegetarian dishes aren't as hard to come by, because they're, in some ways, sometimes that was harder than halal food to find a vegetarian dish. And as far as I know, there's a new mosque being built in Kyoto. I'm hoping it'll be done by the time I go, because that would be nice to. I never felt part of a Muslim community while I was in Tokyo. It was just so hard to see everyone very clean. Everyone splits off into kind of their own ethnicities, because people are from all over. It's not like the UK where one mosque is like mostly Pakistanis, and others Bengalis, and other is Arabs. Um, yeah, but I'm hopeful that I can join a community in Kyoto, and if not join a community in Kyoto, I know in Osaka there's like quite a, not as big as Tokyo, but a sizable Muslim population. And I looked it up. There's this like huge Da'wah Centre, which is kind of intriguing. I think it's
Yeah.
set up by the Indonesian community. So yeah, hopefully. But I think that's the point to mention. I think what the barrier is that isn't, even if we're both Muslim, we're from different cultures. Like, so it's difficult to meet other people despite, like, of course your religion brings you closer and that's your common feature, but it doesn't mean instantly that you be able to have a conversation, or be like instantly included in things. I mean, it shouldn't be like that, but that's how I felt. So the fact is that there's not that many Pakistanis in Japan, and those who are usually like solo men, so like I wouldn't really meet them anyway. um yeah, that's kind of the lowdown. Sorry, that was quite a long answer.
Yeah, yeah, that very detailed, and I really appreciate it. And you mentioned Osaka Da'wah Centre, so a bit of a trivial thing to mention, but inshallah, maybe next weekend I'm getting another lady from Japan. Well, she's Singaporean Canadian. She's been in Japan for
Mm-hmm.
like a decade now. She's an English teacher, and she had the pleasure of going to Osaka Da'wah Centre. It's run by a Malaysian brother, and
Oh,
she
Malaysian,
actually did an
okay.
interview with him there. Yeah. But I understand why you would get that mixed up. Sorry, Indonesians and Malaysians, but yeah, it kind of
Yeah,
gets
I'm
that way.
sorry.
But anyway,
I mean, I only found
yeah,
like a
yeah.
bit on Facebook about it, but yeah, I will listen to that episode because I'm curious as to what they do there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I don't know how much she'd be able to, because she lives in Tokyo herself. Well, she works and lives there. She just had the opportunity to go visit and, you know, interview the guy who runs it. And they have a very interesting way of doing things. It's not all about, hey, this is what the Quran says, and this is the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. They also have like business mentorship programs, and it's not just for like Muslims. Obviously, there's a focus on like people who've just become Muslim, so they've got like no support system. So obviously you would be their support system as the Muslim community, bringing them, giving them an avenue to have halal food, for example, or support them in their new halal business that they started. But
Yeah.
it's not restricted just to them. I mean, and that's what I appreciate about it, is that it's got such an innovative and broad-minded approach to actually understanding and bringing people to Islam, because Islam is supposed to
Hmm.
be something that permeates through each and every aspect of our life. And not to take away from any of the experiences you mentioned, but are you sort of, when you talk about your experience as a Muslimah in Japan, are you kind of, I'm sure you are at a subconscious level, comparing it to what it's like in the UK? Because what you mentioned is, I'm also comparing it to what it's like being Muslim in Botswana, where it's not exactly like how it is in the UK. Yeah, we're a minority as well, but things have kind of developed differently in Africa compared to Europe
Hmm.
and everywhere else. So
Hmm.
basically, are you using the UK as your sort of blueprint? Because I don't think you'd be using Pakistan, which is a Muslim majority country, as your blueprint versus
No.
Japan.
I think because in the UK I grew up in a small town where there are no other Muslims or barely any other Muslims. So as growing up, my family was the only Muslim family that lived there. There's no halal places to eat. There's no mosque. None of these things. So I grew up just doing a lot of this at home. Um, yeah, I remember like the first time I started going to the mosque regularly is when I lived in Jordan because I could, because I've never lived near a mosque to do that. Um, so I think I'm comparing it to my time growing up because even though I did grow up in like a town that was not very diverse, it would probably be like an like 30-40 minute drive to the nearest halal butchers, and we'd stock up. And the mosque is about the same amount, so every now and then we would go. So I compare it to that, and in that case, Tokyo, I'm sure if I had a car or if I was like with family, it would be a different experience. Like I would go out of the way, but if I'm just a solo person living alone, I'm not gonna go all that way to get some meat. Like I can live without it. I ended up cooking a lot just at home. Um, so yeah, I compare it to my like experience growing up in the UK. Yeah,
Yeah, amazing. Because you see how it is in Botswana. If I can give you a bit of background, the
yeah,
closest
please.
mosque to me, where I am right now, yeah, I was born in the capital city of Botswana called Gaborone,
Mm-hmm.
and but it's not where I'm from. I'm from up north in Palape. Right now, because of work and stuff, I've on my own. My family's still back up north. I've moved back to the south, which is the capital city. But to be frank, I'm more on like the outskirts of the capital city. So I don't know how I'd give the example in terms of Japan, but there's Tokyo, and then there might be something like just outside Tokyo. So that's kind of like
Mm-hmm.
where I am right now. It's like 20 k's to the actual city. But
Yeah.
the closest mosque to me, which is in the same area, is like 15 minutes away. Actually 20 minutes, because the road now is really bad, but that's a different story. As far as halal food goes, it's really hard to find chicken that's not halal in Botswana, because the
Mm-hmm.
major like chicken abattoirs, they are all halal certified. That doesn't mean that I just go into any restaurant and just eat, because yeah, okay, it might be halal chicken like slaughtered, but then what are you mixing it with? What are you cooking it with? That's a
Mm-hmm.
all those things have to come into consideration. And um, another little tidbit, I'm actually part of the halal committee back home, like up north where I'm from, Palape Halal Committee. And one of our accolades or achievements is that we were the first to certify KFC in Botswana up north. And
Oh,
after
nice.
us, everyone else followed in our wake. So yeah, if you ever come to Botswana and you see halal KFC, I kind of had something to do with that.
You've
Alhamdulillah.
had a role in it.
So
I'll think of you.
yeah, alhamdulillah. And you know, our approach in Botswana has always been, I know in Japan it looks like it's different. So you've got McDonald's in Japan, but I've not heard of any halal McDonald's or, you know,
Yeah.
seen any. Obviously I haven't been there, but from my friends and acquaintances, I have family in Japan as well, which is
Mm,
they once came to visit us in Botswana, which was an interesting experience. But okay, we can get into that later. But coming back to the whole halal thing, in Botswana, we'll take franchises and kind of certify them first. So I'm
mhm,
sure coming from the UK, you are more than familiar with Nando's. And
mhm,
that actually, yeah, that originated here. Well, it originated in South Africa and then took off more in Botswana. So in Botswana, all the Nando's outlets are also halal. What else have we got?
nice.
We've got a halal, yeah, we've got a halal wimpy. And of course, you've got, you know, some random Pakistani uncle will come and put up his own something with a Pakistani name, and that's also there. And I think that's what's taking precedence in Japan. The Pakistani community and the Uzbekistanis or the Turkish, they have their own,
Turkish,
you know,
especially.
franchises,
Yeah.
so to speak. Yeah, especially. I mean, the Tokyo Jami is basically modeled off the is it the Blue Mosque in Turkey? So they've
Yeah.
definitely got a presence there. So yeah, that's interesting. But also, I find that I'm a bit of a mixed bag when it comes to like origins because my parents are kind of from two different countries, ethnically
Mhm,
speaking. But I don't know if that really plays into me like not really hanging out much with like ethnic communities. Like if I meet up with a Pakistani guy today, I don't mind like going out with him and maybe even chatting with him in Urdu a little bit.
mhm,
And tomorrow I'm with the Indian guy from Gujarat, and the day after that, Sri Lankan guy. That's usually how we've been in Botswana.
mhm.
There hasn't really been. I think most people of immigrant origin in Botswana of Gujarati descent. And that's interesting because I am definitely not that, but I definitely picked up more than a little bit of Gujarati growing up thanks to these people. But my
Yeah.
strongest like Asian language would probably be like Urdu slash Hindi. I think it's more Hindi to be frank, because yeah, my dad's family does go back through India and well, you know, the baraka
Yeah.
of Bollywood, which we have to speak of. So yeah, my mom was always on that. My mom was always
Nice.
watching that, so that definitely permeated into me somewhat. Yeah, so interesting takes on Japan. I'd like to go and experience it for myself and see exactly like what it's like. I empathize with anyone who is struggling because it's not just yourself. It's not a once-off case.
Mhm.
I mean, even people who have been living there for ages will bring up the same points as you. I'm just wondering how it would be for me as someone who comes from a place where, you know, Muslims are a minority, but they're a visible minority because, you know,
Yeah.
even people from in Botswana, people from the village will come to the mosque and they will be like, we're having a party, well, traditional party, and there's one guest coming and he's Muslim. Can you slaughter the cow in a halal fashion? Just for the one
Mhm.
guest. So they know what it, and these are village people. They're not the most educated and high tech sort of people, but they know what Islam is to an extent. They know what it means to be like eating halal. And imagine just for one guest, they'll make you slaughter a whole cow to make sure that everything is halal. So that's an interesting take. So I'd really like to see what it's like.
I wonder if you would be more shocked then, or would it be a bigger change, or maybe because you're expecting it not, just because oh yeah, there's a lot of. I mean, I think I'm very used to kind of self-explaining. So why do you fast? Why do you pray 5 times a day? The questions I've got since I was like in primary school. So it wasn't too different for me in that aspect when I went to Japan, and all of a sudden people are like, "Oh, what is this? Why do you have to eat halal, etc." But I wonder, have you ever, if people generally have a good idea of Islam in Botswana, do you have to explain yourself as much as that? And I wonder if that would be a change.
So I would say yes and no. So, okay, you see, when we were growing up in primary school, we, just like you people, since we were colonized by the Brits, we also do
Mm.
IGCSEs and all that stuff, A levels, and then go into university. Most people skip on A levels here, but though, and they go straight from GCSEs to university itself.
Oh.
So, growing up in like primary school, we had compulsory religious education. It was called religious and moral education. So we had to learn about like every single religion. Well, most religion, major religions like Christianity, obviously, Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, Sikhism. I think we did a bit of like the Baha'i faith, and that's like, well, I don't know why that's classified as like a major religion, but anyway, I won't get into that. So yeah, I mean, growing up, my peers, my friends who were definitely not Muslim, definitely got the idea of, oh, these are people who pray 5 times a day. And we're talking about when I actually came to my senses. Obviously, as like a 5-year-old or 6-year-old, you don't understand these things, and no one around you even cares about that. And that wasn't even the age that I started fasting. So that all started a bit later when we had some sense of what's going on. So people, and this was nationwide. So everyone had an idea of Muslims pray 5 times a day, and Muslims can only eat halal food; they can't eat pork. And of course, you still have to. You see, some people. This sounds ridiculous, but then they would be like, "Oh yeah, all the food is halal, or we're gonna get all halal food for this camping trip," and then they go and get bacon, and then you're like, "What the hell are you doing?" And they're like, "What? Bacon can't be halal?" I'm like, "No, never. Like that's one thing that's never halal." So, having to explain that sort of thing recently, when I just started working at the company I am now, the law firm, it's a very small thing. It's like we're literally 3 people. It's myself, my boss, and our secretary. That's us. So we've got like a double story thing. So I think on the first week of like me joining, it was a Friday. So obviously I went to mosque for Jummah, but then I came back and I had to read Asr like 2 hours later. And my boss walked in and was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'll come back later." And when he did come back, he was just asking about, so what's the relevance of like Friday in your faith? And then I had to explain the whole thing to him. I
Yeah.
wasn't annoyed because I think even Muslims don't understand what the significance of Friday is.
Yeah.
And so there's also another element I'd like to add to this. So I'm kind of a minority within a minority. So I follow the Maliki madhab, or the Maliki school of thought in Islam. So we've got 4 major ones. My
Yeah.
parents were born into the Hanafi one, and
Yeah, I'm
I was
Hanafi.
also kind of brought up in that. Yeah, yeah. So I was brought up in that, but when I grew up and started studying, I became like Maliki myself. So many things I do, people find weird, although no one's really confronted me about it. Like when I go and pray, I don't fold my hands in any manner whatsoever. Like my
Yeah.
hands are to my side, and that's just one thing. We've got many differences, visible differences with the Hanafis.
Yeah.
So I understand that, yeah, it's not just about explaining Islam to non-Muslims, it's also about explaining the Maliki madhab to people who've never encountered it before, even though they will say that, yeah, the Maliki madhab is definitely valid, but they will have so many questions like, but then that doesn't make sense how you do this, and doesn't that contradict this verse of the Quran or something like that? And going even further than me being Maliki, I'm kind of a weird dude because, I'm a punk rocker, by the way. So I was actually in a band once upon a time. Yeah. And I used to I used to play lead guitar and everything. I fell off a bit, but
Cool.
inshallah, I'm coming back into that.
So again,
And
yeah.
then, yeah, I'm still, inshallah. Like, you see, I tie my hair. I'm wearing earrings at the moment. And if I'm not at work, I usually have them on. So then that's
Yeah.
another like something you have to explain to people like, oh, so why do you do it? And then, you come up and say something like, well, Imam Malik had an earring. And then we're like, what? We've never heard that before. I'm like, well, now you know. So, I mean, even if that wasn't the case, I'm not saying this necessarily from a religious perspective. I'm saying that I kind of enjoy like introducing my perspective to people, because even within like the Muslim circles, there's always questions of, why are you listening to music, why are you playing music, why are
Yeah.
you so free with the opposite gender or something like that. I'm like, okay, these are like ijtihadi issues. Like there's a wide area of difference of opinion on them, and I go towards one as opposed to the other. So it's
Yeah.
not a matter of like life and death when it comes to this. So yeah, and you really have to pick your battles here, because imagine me
Yeah.
explaining to a non-Muslim that um why I'm kind of having an argument with the other guy who goes to the same mosque as me about why music is permissible or not. Like they will
Yeah.
just shut down at that moment. So yeah, you really have to kind of, I wouldn't say watch your step, but when you're going on this road, go there like intelligently. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's basically me. And I guess even if I went to Japan, I don't know if you encountered any Malikis there, but I'm sure if I went into the Turkish mosque and started praying with my hands to the side, that people would stare at me because they've never seen something like that before, or they've only seen that on TV. So
Hmm.
there's definitely that aspect for me to consider.
Yeah, I think I didn't. I think when I went to I only really went for congregational prayer on Eid, just because it was really difficult to go any other time. I went to Tokyo, Germany, and it was really interesting because everyone was kind of from really diverse backgrounds, here and there, and so everyone prayed differently. Everyone's Eid clothes were different, so that was quite nice. But I think because it is a mosque that serves such a small but diverse community, it was less of a big deal. It's similar in the UK, like even though there's some areas and some mosques that will have like mainly Pakistani or mainly Nigerian, etc. A lot of mosques are just for a big mix of ethnicities, and so whenever there's differences like that, it doesn't really become a huge deal. I've never really seen a huge like any discussion or argument. I don't know about on the men's side, but on the women's side, I don't see anything. And what but yeah but when I think if you live in somewhere where that is like purely one kind of Muslim, like it's Pakistan or Jordan, they have their own culture kind of ingrained with their faith. um so I remember when I was in Jordan in the mosque, or when I went to like Jerusalem, etc., a lot of people would come and they would be like, oh, you can't wear this, or even if I'd wear what I consider pretty modest clothing, they'd be like, give me a cover up, or they'd like tap my head, be like, cover your hair, cover your hair, all of that. And it's only times like that when I've been in a place that's really homogenous in the Muslims that go there that I felt like I stood out. So it's interesting to hear that you have a place even when that isn't is Botswana very homogenous in its Muslims?
Um, I think it would be fair to say yes, because if you're going to look at it on like a probability scale, yeah, there are definitely people like me who like, and you who, think outside the box and they've got different approaches to things. And yeah, they've got interesting stories such as yourself when it comes to, Japanese culture. I know, well,
Mm.
maybe not so much in the Muslim community, but I know a lot of young women in Botswana are really into K-pop, and they speak Korean. Like, if they send you a voice note, you'd think that this person is from Korea. So
Oh yeah.
yeah, they are definitely into that. So, it depends.
Yeah, I can understand Korean because of how much I've heard that.
Well, K-pop has just become a global phenomenon at this point, so there's no fighting it, I suppose. Coming back to, is Botswana homogenous? You see, even myself, if I'm not back home, if I'm here in Gaborone, in the capital city, there are some mosques, big mosques, that I actively avoid, because that's also to do mostly with my like history. I was kind of really into certain like conservative groups once upon a time. We never had some ridiculous ideologies. I hope I'm not giving you the wrong impression. I didn't, think of like killing people. Like, I was never into that sort of group, but I was into, like, I was a bit more conservative. Yeah, I had long hair, but I
Mhm.
never tie it. I would never wear earrings or anything. And yeah, my beard was a bit, it was messier than what it is right now, is what I'd say. So I kind of don't want to interact with those people anymore, because I don't want to justify to them. Like,
Yeah.
it's a different thing if I'm at a restaurant and then, someone, and I'm waiting for this sort of conversation to happen, then I'm more than happy to have that conversation with you. But, when I'm going to the mosque to pray, I don't have time to entertain your questions, which I've answered like a million times before. And I
Yeah.
literally just want to pray and go out. So myself, I literally stick to the mosque that's closest to me, because it's, I guess ethnically it's kind of homogenous. It's mostly Pakistanis who go there, but that's mostly to do with the people who built it. The
Mhm.
Imam himself is not like, I don't even think he's properly Hanafi. He's probably more on the Shafi side, because
Mm.
they don't have this congregational dua after prayer. That never happens in our mosque unless it's a special occasion. Like, there was a time when someone passed away, so we made that congregational dua
Yeah.
after Jummah, or someone had a baby, so that kind of thing. So that's kind
Mhm.
of where I fall. So you kind of had to know where to go. I know
Mhm.
back home, people have kind of been receptive to this change of mine. Like, I think it's fairly evident at this point that I am Maliki, and I'm not going to involve myself in like all those, Hanafi
Yeah.
things, not because I think it's incorrect. It's just I don't follow it anymore. So why
Yeah.
should I? So they are more receptive to it. They'll still enlist my services for, like, the Halal committee and all that sort of stuff. And they've accepted it.
Mm.
In places like Khabaruni, you have to kind of watch your step. And I know,
Mm.
like, there are certain industries. In fact, even in this podcast itself, I had an Islamic scholar, Sheikh Ismail Kamdar. He's from South Africa. He came on and he talked about the topi, which we call it in Urdu. Like, he talked
Yeah.
about, you don't have to wear it. It's not a sunnah. It's just a cultural thing. And I posted on one of these groups, and I got, like, low key hate mail at 3 o'clock in the morning. Like,
Oh
brother,
no.
you are destroying the unity of the ummah. I'm like, it's a scholar who is giving his opinion. If you disagree, don't listen to him. But
Mm.
yeah, so basically yes and no. I know in the UK it can get really intense sometimes. Like, I've seen videos of people actually fighting with cricket bats,
Oh
like outside the
yeah.
masjid. Probably, like, that's a minority of a minority, but
Mm-hmm.
basically I guess that sort of mentality kind of exists everywhere. The one place I have not seen that sort of nonsense is literally a place like Japan. I guess maybe that's because they're so few in number, because yeah,
Yeah.
and those guys, these conservative bunch, generally don't go to a place like Japan, at least for long-term purposes.
I really think it's about, the homogeneity of the congregation, because I only see that stuff happening here in the UK in mosques where that are mostly one ethnicity or one type of Muslim. But because the like mosque I go to is usually like a pretty good mix, and even in Japan, it's a pretty good mix, and you can't really start those things. You can't have. It's not that you can't have those discussions, but it never becomes like a point of contention, because if you're a homogenous group, then it almost becomes a sort of like self-identity sort of thing. Like, yeah, I'm Hanafi, and we do things this way, and then that's when anyone different changes. But if you're not a homogenous group, you don't have that big backing to kind of build that self-identity on. You just have the knowledge that you are what you are, and so I think it's a bit harder to um, start conversations, or a bit harder to like get into those sort of, I want to say discussions, but also arguments with people. So I think that, in my opinion, that's what it comes down to, and that's the only times I see in the UK.
Right. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head there. So, if we can zero it down on you, what are some of the, shall we say, strategies or
Mm-hmm.
maybe techniques? How do you cope with, the sort of BS, pardon my French, but, that people have to spew about, maybe you're really into fashion, if we can go by that Korekara podcast, and you're really into Japanese music, and music, whether we
Mm-hmm.
accept it as permissible or not, it still remains a contentious, like, topic. So how do you go about your daily life with people kind of flinging these questions at you? Do you, like, not entertain them at all? What's your approach? I always like to get, like, people's insight into this so I can also learn new avenues and tricks.
If people are respectful in the way they ask me, not accusatory, not asking in bad faith. Some people ask you questions just to be like, no, or try to argue against you. But if people are genuinely curious, then I'll answer, no problem. And I think if people, if there's people around me, I mean, I was part of my old university's Islamic Society. I still take part in my current university's Islamic Society here and there, and a lot of different views in Islamic societies, and it's a great place for discussion. But if someone is around me who I find is very persistent, or is not very flexible in who doesn't have the idea that other people can believe in different things and that's okay, we are all Muslims still, um, I usually just don't spend much time with them. I surround myself with people who, regardless if they believe the same thing or not, who I think are very encouraging to my faith and to my deen. And it's great to have friends at like different levels. So I have friends who are Muslim, but maybe not that practicing, not that religious. But I've learnt so many more things from them than I have even learnt from some of people I know in the Islamic society, from the way they carry themselves, from the things they do. So it's really about each individual rather than, and the effect they have on you, rather than how practicing they are, whether they're the same group as you are. So like, and I have another friend who is he's a lot more religious than me, and seeing him, how he kind of sets his boundaries and how he talks about things makes me more motivated to, oh, okay, reflect on myself, I should do the same. At the same time, my friend who's not as practicing, but when she does things, she really focuses on the part of Islam that's more about caring for others, doing charity, etc. Even if she doesn't pray regularly and all of that, and seeing her do those things motivates me as well. And so I think the way I deal with it is I just surround myself who, no matter where they lie on kind of like the religiosity scale, whether they're Shia, Sunni, whether they're any of those things, if they have a good impact on me and my faith and my way of thinking, then I would spend time with them. And the people who don't, who always make me, because if people are really persistent with questions, etc., it's almost as if they tell you you're wrong, or if people who don't show that respect, or people who end up making me second guess my own beliefs or what I've been raised with, I don't think that is those are people who are beneficial to spend a lot of time with. So I base it purely on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Amazing. And I think that's an invaluable skill to develop as one sort of grows up and grows into the world. That, yeah, just because someone, has the same ethnic background as you, or I can speak to this myself, they go to the same mosque as you, doesn't mean that they necessarily have your best interests. And I've got some major pitfalls that I look back on and I say to myself, never again. So, yeah, thank you very much for that. That's definitely insightful, definitely helped to sort of unpack a lot of things that were very confusing and sort of floating everywhere and put it into one coherent package. But now coming back to yourself, for your yeah, at one point on Korekara, you mentioned that you studied German and Arabic. Where does that combination come from? Okay, Arabic, we can
Yeah.
kind of point fingers like, okay, well, we've been learning Arabic even though we don't really understand it. But, to read the Quran in Arabic, we learned that from a young age. So can kind of point fingers there. But where did German come
Yeah.
from?
So for me, it's actually the opposite way around. I mean, obviously, I knew the importance of Arabic, and like you know, I've had a teacher, half a sub, come to my house and teach me how to do like read Arabic and recite the Quran nicely. So I was aware of it to that extent. With German, what really happened was after starting to learn Japanese, I realized that, oh, languages is something I enjoy and I'm good at them. And I picked up German for GCSE, and my GCSE teacher was so great. She was just so enthusiastic. She always answered my questions when I asked for further reference. I'm someone who I don't like learning from a textbook or in a classroom setting, and so she gave me loads of different kind of sites, links to music I'd like in German, etc. And that really like inspired me so much that when I went to A level, I thought I'm never going to be able to do anything but German. And then Arabic came along afterwards. So as I was applying to unis, at first I was looking at German and Japanese, but that's a very difficult combination to find, and it wasn't at my dream uni. And then I realized that I don't have much interest in Japanese in the academic sense, and I didn't want studying in academia to ruin the fun I get from the language, because I know that can happen with people. So I decided to focus on languages I'm interested in an academic sense. So first was German. So this is 2015, 2016, which was the height of the European refugee crisis, or was former height. I mean, I think there's a new crisis now, but I just remember on the news how the UK really didn't take that many people in, but Germany really welcomed and opened their arms to so many Syrians, Lebanese, Palestinians, etc. And that was really intriguing for me, and I just, you see the news reports and it's just so heartbreaking. Now and then, nothing has changed. And I just remember thinking that even though with Arabic, people usually pair languages that have like a historical relationship, like French or Spanish. For me, I thought Arabic would be a nice thing to do with German because there's it's going to be the future. If you have 1 million Arabic speakers or mostly Arabic speakers join a country, it's going to affect that country's culture and scene forever. And it's because I realized my interest was working with refugees. I felt like English, German, Arabic. I'm working on my Urdu. It's not that good, but English, German, Arabic, and inshallah Urdu soon will would be great
Inshallah.
languages to have to work in that field. So that's what it came down to. And then when I started Arabic, I mean, obviously, partly part of it was because it's part of Arabic. I could also kind of study a bit more into like Islamic theology, philosophy, all of that. Tafsir. Well, I got to study all those things in a Western academic setting, you know, not in a madrasa, which I think was a very interesting experience, and I really enjoyed it, to be honest. But at this, and as I got into it, I also just realized how much I really like contemporary Arabic. Big fan of recent Arabic literature, and so my main interest is really now spoken Arabic. And yeah, learning Arabic has also definitely made it a lot easier for me to when I'm trying to like memorize surahs or any of that. Like I find it a lot easier. So it just had loads of benefits, but German was the leading thing. I was definitely going to do German, and I was just looking for something that I could match with German in a way that felt right for me. And Arabic was the one.
Wow,
Yeah.
wow, amazing. I mean, I remember you saying on your Instagram messages that it's not that deep, but it's kind of deeper than you initially made it out to be. It's a lot more than just a random combination, mashallah. So, yeah, I mean, we wish you all the best when it comes to your work in, you said you wanted to help the refugees on a more hands-on approach, perhaps. So, yeah, that's definitely a noble goal to have. And, you know, learning a language is never time lost, I would say. So it's
Never.
interesting. I did French for my IGCSEs, and I people said I'd never use it again, but I recently started doing translations for this Islamic history page on Instagram. So as in, I don't I don't always do the full translation. Sometimes the guy just sends me, because we converse in French, like, oh, assalamu
Oh
alaikum,
wow.
saba, mon frère. Yeah, yeah. We converse in French, and then he'll send me the translation that he got from a professional translator, like from the post in French to English, and then I'd just go over and cut out what doesn't make sense or make edits here and there.
Yeah.
And last week I had the privilege of doing a bit more than that. I actually did the translations myself, and which was interesting. So I'm getting to rekindle my French in that way after almost 10 or 11 years. So it's
Yeah.
never
Nice.
time lost, I would say. So alhamdulillah. So yeah, Sana, we are almost coming up to the 1 hour mark. Do you have any parting words or questions for our listeners and viewers?
Well, I hope you found any of what I said interesting. I hope the viewers will, especially the conversation we had about within conversations having the mosque. I hope viewers remember that the most important thing is to have respect and care for each other as humans. And I hope, I'm sure that a lot of the viewers do that already, but I would love them to continue that. And if any of my advice helped you, I mean, or Moss's advice helped you, please let him know. That would be really nice to hear if it was helpful. And yeah, nice meeting you all.
Oh, likewise, mashallah. And where can the viewers find you if you're comfortable sharing any of your platforms? You mentioned on
Yeah.
Korekara that you had some videos on YouTube which you deleted, so we won't mention that, but everything else is fair game.
My YouTube is from when I used to do Japanese subtitles for like Japanese band interviews and K-pop group interviews. So I just have stuff like that left on there. But yeah, YouTube is not the best place to see me. Probably probably Instagram. I don't mind you sharing my Instagram. I think I shared it with Korekara as well anyways. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's a pretty good place if you want to know more. I mean, I feel like uh yeah, I could go on talking for ages. So if you want to know more, hit me up. I'm chill with that.
Oh, amazing, amazing. And would you like to cap off this whole episode by giving us a few words on fashion? Because I'm gonna keep mentioning them, but Korekara, you mentioned, about Harajuku and how it's all about, at least now, finding your individuality. And fashion for me as well, maybe not as explicitly as yourself, but I'm sure on some level everyone can empathize with having a fashion sense, so to speak. So in my case, being an African of Asian descent, so having those influences and having punk as an influence, so whether it's my earrings or the way I do my hair, and I used to have spikes back in the day. And in your case, you mentioned about it may be wearing traditional Pakistani clothing but with more kawaii colors or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Give us a bit more on that, just to cap off the episode. Like, what exactly does it mean to have your own sense of fashion?
Yeah. I guess I'll start off with that, especially within Muslim communities, fashion is often looked down on, and it's kind of, especially women, it's kind of like, if you wear hijab, why are you beautifying yourself? I've heard things like that before. And I just want to write off in that fashion and being interested in fashion has been extremely important in my religious journey, and it has made me more comfortable with wearing the hijab because I started when I was 17, and I only did it because it's so silly, but I was still very self conscious then, and I only started wearing the hijab when I saw how great a lot of the hijab wearing influencers and fashion bloggers looked and how creative they were in making it fit. It was the first exposure I had to. Before that, I'd only known subcultures where you have to wear a certain brand or wear things a certain way, and because it they were never really the most modest, I never felt I could truly be a part of it until these hijabi influencers and bloggers come up, and I'm like, oh wait, I could just change things. And their creativity is what pushed me to start wearing the hijab, and that kind of also led me on to what do I want to do with fashion. And like you said, for me right now, I am most comfortable in traditional Pakistani clothes. I still don't wear them regularly in the UK because honestly, unfortunately, it brings me some hassle. People assume I can't speak English, all of that stuff. But I I'm slowly incorporating it more into myself. And when I really felt truly myself is where being able to wear traditional Pakistani clothes in somewhere like Japan and have it be recognized by, people I've admired in the fashion scene. People be like, oh, that is a thing. For it's like a sort of me being able to wear these traditional clothes and not feel like um, that's internalized kind of colonization mentality that, oh, it's better to be Western because it's Western. It's made me more confident. That's had a knock-on effect, not only how I feel about like my identity as a British Pakistani woman, but also like how I feel when people compare my faith to how things are done in the West, how what I believe, how I speak, how I act around others is giving me a lot more confidence to just be like this. So I think having a sense of fashion, as we called it, um, I don't really like the idea of there being like a singular fashion sense or like a bar that you can measure all different fashion on. But I do think fashion, having a sense for fashion and getting a sense of what you like in fashion is very helpful for kind of resolving some of those issues that you may have with, self confidence, self identity, self expression. I find it a very useful tool for that. And so to anyone who says that there's no point in fashion and there's no point in beautifying yourself, how can if I feel 100 times better when I do, and I think I can even be a better Muslim now that I do. So I wonder what they have to say to that. I hope people really think about it before they say things like that, and also consider the importance of clothing and style in their lives as well.
Yeah, amazing. And as the hadith goes, if I can flex a
Yeah,
little bit of my
flex.
Arabic, Allahu Jamil wa yuhibbul Jamal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, Allah is beautiful and He loves
Yeah,
beauty. So, and many, I mean, so much of me rekindling my relationship with my faith has been this, what Dr. Khalid Abul Fadl says is the search for beauty in Islam. It's not always about rigorous
yeah,
structures and, you know, how do you tie your turban? How does your beard look? How do you do your hijab? It's not always about
no,
that, but I think what you said, yeah, really ties in well with beautifying yourself and looking for that inner beauty and that beauty within Islam and the beauty within everything else that exists there.
be-
Alhamdulillah. So, Sana, it's been an amazing.
Yeah, I was just gonna add, like, beauty. I think, beauty is in how you carry yourself and how you treat others, and I think that really sums up how I said earlier. I surround myself with people who, regardless of their like religious faith, etc., have that beauty in how they carry themselves and treat others. So yeah, I think that's a really good point you made. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. So, you know, thank you very much, Sana, for taking time out of your Sunday morning to come on to a podcast which you knew nothing about. Um, so we really appreciate it. And yeah, you're more than welcome to come again and again. And maybe we'll see you in Botswana sometime soon now that things are turning, back to normal, so to
Yeah,
speak. Or at the very least, maybe inshallah, we'll see you in Japan, inshallah, if you stay there for an extended period of time.
inshallah.
Well, the world is a small place. I'm sure we'll bump into each other somewhere somehow.
Definitely.
Things just work out like that. But I definitely enjoyed this conversation. I hope that feeling is sort of mutual, alhamdulillah. But yeah, and I'm pretty sure that the viewers and the listeners definitely listened and had a great time listening in on our conversation, alhamdulillah. So we really hope that everyone out there had a great time and got to see things from different perspectives, maybe challenge their biases and learn the importance of learning languages as well as finding the beauty within yourselves and within everything else. So it's been an amazing time, alhamdulillah, from the scholar and the student here in Khabaroni, Botswana. We've got Sana from the UK. To everyone, and especially to Sana, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace.
Peace. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for sticking around till the end. We really appreciate it. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. And if you're using an audio platform, give us a 5-star rating. All of these things drive up the algorithm as well as commenting. So let us know how it was for you. The Patreon and Ko-fi links are active down below. If you wish to use them, that's up to you. In Ramadan, I do recommend that you use Launch Good or any other charity app instead. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum.